Okay, so I have the pleasure to interview Jamey Stegmaier, who is the founder and face of Stonemaier Games, who has designed and or published several best-selling games such as Viticulturen, Scythe, Tapestryn and Euphoria, just to name a few. So welcome, Jamey.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We will talk about designing, publishing and playing board games. And this interview is done for the first ever Finnish digital board game event, Pöydällä Digital. So let's start with a warming up question. What are the most recent board games, one bigger and one filler, that you've had on board physically and digitally?
Just games that I've been playing recently?
Yes.
Yeah, so one bigger game that I played in person recently was The King's Dilemma. It's a pretty big, sprawling legacy game that comes down to kind of yes or no voting decisions in the game, where you're deciding how to steer the kingdom. Have you played this game, The King's Dilemma?
Yes, I have. I had played the game. Yeah, really nice.
Oh, awesome.
Experience. Yeah.
Awesome. We're 6 games in at this point, so I'm really curious to see where it will lead. And I imagine your kingdom ended up quite different than mine based on some of the decisions that we're making.
Yeah, probably. I think we had 15 different games.
15. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm really enjoying that. That's a big in-person game that I'm playing. And then a smaller game that I've been playing on Board Game Arena is a game called Small Islands. Have you played Small Islands?
Yes, exactly, on BGA. Yeah.
Yeah. I've really been enjoying that one. It's a little bit like Carcassonne, but different enough that I really enjoy the feel of it. And it's beautiful art. It's just a tile placement game where you're building a series of islands together with players. So yeah, been really enjoying that one too. I can't think of any lighter games that I've played in person, and a heavier game that I played on Board Game Arena recently, or anywhere online. Probably Terra Mystica. Terra Mystica is one of the heavier games that I play. I play that fairly often on Board Game Arena.
Yeah, okay. That's one that I'd like to try, but I haven't played.
Oh, you haven't played that one? Oh, yeah.
I'm a bit ashamed of it. Okay. So Stonemaier Games was founded about 10 years ago, and you published since, according to BGG, 11 games, excluding expansions, right?
That's right, yeah.
So is there a Stonemaier game to which you have a special bond, and which one and why?
Well, we don't make many games. Like you said, we've been around for almost 10 years now, and we only have 11 games. And so every one is special to me in a different way. But the game that I typically think of when I hear this question is Between Two Cities, because that is the first game that we published that wasn't designed by me. And so it felt really good to kind of level up the company a little bit and expand to games that I love, but that were designed by other designers that are doing things that I would never have even thought of. And so that was a big stepping point in the life cycle of Stonemaier Games.
Yeah, I actually just watched today your video about the history of Stonemaier Games, and it was very interesting to see all those different stages and shifts in your business.
Yeah. I need to revisit that video. I think I filmed that a few years ago now, so I need to update.
Yeah. It was made in 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
19. Yeah. Okay. So is there a mechanic that you have not used yet as a principal mechanic, but in which you would definitely want to use in a future game?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a lot of mechanisms that I love that I haven't used as the core mechanism for a game, but maybe I found little ways to put it into our games, like little mini games in Tapestry or things like that. But there's one big mechanism that I love that I haven't used yet, and that is I cut, you choose, or I price, you choose. I love that mechanism. I love it in Castles of Metkin Ludwig. I love it in simpler games that I have some, like Hanami Koji. I love it in Hanami Koji. I love playing games with I cut, you choose. But I haven't designed a game around it yet. So that's one that I'd love to visit and use in a feature in a game someday.
Yeah. So you haven't used it, not even as a little mechanic there.
I can't think of an instance. I mean, maybe there's a card or two in one of our games that like Viticulturen probably has something like that on a visitor card, but it really hasn't been used very much at all. Do you have a favorite game or a game that you like in that genre?
Actually, it's not my kind of genre because I find it much too difficult. I tend to think too much of all the options, and it takes too much time for me, and usually also for my husband. So it's like slow games for us, and they cause a lot of anxiety. So maybe not our favorite genre. Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. So you mentioned Viticulturen, which is actually one of my all-time favorite games, and I'm curious to know. I'm always curious to know about themes and how the designers fix the certain themes. Like, is it the theme that is first, or is it the mechanic that is first? And I know it's both usually. In the case of Viticulturen, how early on did you make the decision that you want to design a board game about viticulturing?
Yeah, Viticulturen is one of my games that I actually did start purely with the theme. I was trying to think of a theme so this was the game that launched Stonemaier Games, and at the time I didn't know that we would even be a company. I thought I just wanted to use Kickstarter to publish a game because I love Kickstarter, I love designing games. And I wanted to pick a game that I thought would appeal to gamers who don't necessarily love science fiction and fantasy themes. Those themes I love, but I knew there's a pretty good sector of gamers, Euro gamers, who love like farming games. So I wanted to appeal to those types of gamers, and I wanted to appeal to non-gamers who might be turned off by some of the themes that they might stereotypically picture in board games, like those science fiction and fantasy themes. So I wanted to pick something that was in between that could appeal to both of those audiences. And I came up with the romanticized idea of running a vineyard, which in real life, I'm guessing is quite a bit of work, but on the table, in Italy, yeah, exactly. But on the table, it's more relaxing, I think, but still gives you hopefully some clever decisions and some progression to make. So yeah, it stemmed from those two, trying to appeal to those two audiences.
Yeah. So like tasting wines is not like your hobby, or is it?
It isn't. No, I'm not even much of a wine drinker. I'll drink a little bit from time to time, but it's not something I even knew much about. I had to research a lot of it to design the game.
Okay. Yeah. So is there a theme you would want to use in one of your games? Just as you said, there's a mechanic you want to use. Is there a certain theme you are really interested in?
Well, one of my favorite fictional themes that I revisit, and especially in terms of books and movies, is time travel and time loops. Movies like Groundhog Day or The Edge of Tomorrow, where you're repeating the same day over and over in different ways, or to any type of time travel. I love that as a theme. And so I am tempted someday to design a game with that theme. However, there are some pretty great games with that theme already. I love Time Stories. Anachrony did some really clever things with time travel and other games like that. So I don't know necessarily if it's a theme that I will find something innovative and unique and different, but if I do, I will eagerly design a game with that theme. Yeah.
Okay. So as you are both a designer and a publisher, you run your own publishing company. In a scenario that you would not have time to do both, which one would you choose? Have you ever thought about that?
I am hoping I never have to make that decision, because I really do I found that I love variety in many different aspects of life, and especially with my job. I like that I can spend part of my day working with customers in communications and marketing, and spend part of my day working on logistics, and part of my day working on game development, and then maybe if I'm lucky, an hour or two spent on game design. I love that balance. I love the variety. In a hypothetical world where I truly had to pick one of those things, like game design and development or running a company, it's such a hard question to answer, because I really do love the balance of both. I guess one way that I could say it is, I think Stonemaier Games could be successful if I just got tired of designing games and didn't want to do that anymore. I think we could continue to be successful as a company if I was just part of the team that's running Stonemaier Games, me and Joe and Alex. And so if it came to that, I would be comfortable continuing to work and run Stonemaier Games and not design games if I had to. So I'll go with that answer, but I hope I never have to make that choice.
Yeah. Is it maybe because what I read about your blogs and watch your videos, you are very passionate about the communities and creating communities? Is that maybe the reason why you would choose to run the business instead of designing, because that's the way how you can bond with the board gamers?
That's a huge part of it. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that's something that I discovered my love of during the Kickstarter days when we used Kickstarter, just building that community, engaging with people, and we've continued to do that post Kickstarter as well. And I absolutely love that. I love the board game community, and I think that's a great point.
Okay, then actually I have a question one very exact question from one of our Finnish board game friends. Mine, who is curious to know whether Stonemaier Games routinely follows print and play versions or print and play games that are linked to your already existing games, like the case with My Little Scythe, which was, I guess, if I'm right, it was first a print and play game, and then you notice it, and then you wanted to make it a game of Stonemaier Games. Is that something you do routinely, follow these PNP games?
That's a great question. It depends on the game. So for example, when Scythe had only one expansion, Invaders from Afar, at that point I had no other ideas for any other expansions. And so I really paid closely attention to print and play games and print and play expansions and modules that people were posting in the Scythe Facebook group and on Board Game Geek. And one of them really jumped out to me, and that became the Win Gambit. Someone had come up with this idea of airships as a unit in the game and how that could impact the game. And so that was something I was looking out for. I was looking out for someone else to show not just an idea, but something that they had actually gone through the process of designing and playtesting at least a little bit and writing the rules for. And the same happened for The Rise of Fenris. The same happened, you mentioned, for My Little Scythe. It's happened in little other places. But I answer that way because, for example, with Scythe, we are done making expansions for Scythe. It is a complete story, a complete game at this point. And so even though I encourage people to continue to post their ideas and any modules, expansions that they want to develop on their own and share with people for free, it's not something that I am actively looking for a publishing perspective anymore. So it really depends on where a game is in the life cycle of that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then about digital games, so Viticulturen and maybe Tapestry a bit later on will be published on the Board Game Arena. And I read about your blog about your thoughts related to digital platforms. It was also that blog text was some years old already. We know that both Viticulturen and Tapestry will be on BGA. How much have you been involved in those development processes?
Very little. I try to pick developers that can just take the game, because I've already spent so much time on these games, developing the games to being playable and fun and functional, intuitive, all that stuff. And so I try to find developers that are able to take the game that we've already made and do what they do best and create a intuitive and fun digital version of the game. That goes for Board Game Arena or the full AI digital versions of our games. And so with Board Game Arena, for example, with Viticulturen, I didn't even know that it was on alpha. I knew that I'd given them the rights to put the game on their platform, but I found out from someone else that it was on alpha. And once I found that out, I asked a few people to play test it and test it out. I actually have not played it on Board Game Arena yet. I need to try it there. But we do have Joe at our company. So I have two other full-time employees, Alex and Joe. And Joe is our director for communications. And part of Joe's job is whenever there is at least an early version of a digital game, part of his job is to play that digital version and offer feedback. For me, it's something that I love playing our games, but I've already play tested the heck out of Viticulture as a game. And so I just want to sit down and play, and I don't want to test it anymore. And so that's why Joe typically is the person who tests those digital versions.
Yeah. But that's actually something that I've heard from other publishers and game designers as well, that once the game is out and ready, they don't really want to touch it because they have so much, they are so done with it. So are you still done with Viticulture or Scythe or these games, or is it easy to do you still play those games if asked?
if someone is eager to play those games with me, I am more than happy to play them. Like I design games that I love to play, and I try to develop games that I love to play. So I'm happy to play them. I'm happy to teach them. I think the difference with the digital versions is I don't want to test them anymore. I'm done thinking about the game from like a development perspective. And so I think that's the difference there. But once Viticulture is available on beta or full on Board Game Arena, if anyone wants to play, I am happy to play. I get excited to play Viticulture.
What are the newest publication plans of Stonemaier Games?
From the digital side or the printed side?
Printed side.
Printed side. So the things that we've announced so far are our upcoming lineup. So I guess the game that I've announced very recently, I have it right behind me here, is the Between Two Castles expansion, Secrets and Soirees. So this is what we've announced recently. I've shared what's in this expansion, and that'll be on pre-order very soon. And then that'll be followed by the printed version of Rolling Realms, which will be our 12th game. That's an infinitely scaling roll and write game that I originally introduced as a print and play game, and now we have an official printed version. And then after that will be the next Tapestry expansion. And after that will most likely be the Wingspan Big Box, which isn't a game, it's just a big box and an organizer to hold all the Wingspan stuff that we have so far, and that will hold stuff that we'll release in the future as well. So I think those are all the things that I've announced officially so far in some capacity. Yeah.
How many years ahead do you plan? Like maybe you have rough timetables, but like how many games are there in your mind before you have announced them with a certain fixed or semi-fixed timetables, schedules?
Yeah, I would say semi-fixed is a good way of saying it. And I typically try to plan around 2 to 3 years in advance. And so I have a few games. I'm usually working on designing 2 games at a time. And the 2 games that I'm currently working on will probably be released next year or the next year. And then we typically have a game designed by someone else, by an outside designer, that's released every year as well. So, and usually we have expansions in the works too. So right now I would say with expansions and games, we're planned out for the next 2 years with some vague things that could be ready 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so now that we are in the midst of the pandemic, I must have some pandemic-related questions.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring the positive points of view out of all of this. Which have the best or the positive board game related experiences that you had during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, one of my favorite things to come out of it, and I'm curious if you've experienced this as well, but I used to host, and I will get back to doing this. Most of my friends now are vaccinated. We will very soon get back to having small in-person gaming. But I used to have a weekly Wednesday game night that I would host. I hosted it every night for years, or every week for years. And I really miss that. But one thing I realized early on during COVID, when I switched to a virtual game night, we usually play on Board Game Arena or yukata.de, and we do it every other Wednesday. One thing I realized is that I no longer was limited to inviting people who live in St. Louis, where I live. I can invite people around the world. I can invite friends from around the US, as long as they weren't sleeping. I think probably by the time we have our game nights, you're probably fast asleep. But I can invite anyone to these game nights. And so that was really, really wonderful that I've been able to play with people on a regular basis, friends from around the world and around the US on a regular basis at game nights. So even when I switch back to in-person game nights, I may keep an ongoing virtual game night so I can continue to play games with those people. What about you? What's been one of your favorite
Actually,
things to come
the
out
same story. We also run a weekly board game club with my husband every Tuesday, and now for the last year or so during the pandemic, we had it on BGA, Board Game Arena. And actually, already talking how difficult it will be when we go back to the physical premises, to just play one game at a time, because now we play simultaneously a dozen games. So maybe we have to organize tables and have a dozen games on. We just run between them and make our own. So that's I guess we have become more impatient as players because we have all these games going on simultaneously. So what about you? Do you think like this pandemic as a whole has changed you as a board gamer some way, or if it has changed the industry?
Well, it may have, so similar to what you just said, it may have spoiled me a little bit in terms of setup for games, because digital games set up themselves. You don't have to set it up. And so I still play games, like I play games with my girlfriend. I play games in person from time to time safely with masks on, things like that. And so I'm used to still setting up games and being part of that setup process, but I'm definitely a little spoiled by the digital setups. As an industry, I think it's definitely, I think it'll affect conventions in the long term. I think it has impacted, it will impact design in terms of solo and two-player games. I think in the coming years, we'll see lots of games that are designed for solo only, or that will include solo, more so than in the past. And I think we'll see more games that are specifically for two players, because I think a lot of us were maybe limited to playing safely with two players for a long time. And that's been kind of the design mindset for a lot of people for a long time. So, and I don't necessarily think I think that's a good thing. I think both of those are good things to come out of this. Yeah.
Also, I think like escape games have had like a burst during the pandemic. Maybe they would have had that even without the pandemic, but no, I think it's something that it's very like they're kind of gateway games. People already were used to have these real escape games, and now they can have the same experience with a board game. So that's something that we have noticed in Finland.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Okay, so last question, Jamey. If the listeners would like to follow Stonemaier Games, your news, and be updated about your future plans, what are the best channels to do so?
Well, we offer a lot of different channels, so it's however you want to follow us. So I talk about game design on my YouTube channel. I talk about crowdfunding and entrepreneurship on the Stonemaier Games blog. I post photos of the games that I'm playing, and sometimes my cats, on my Instagram feed, which is at Jamey Stegmaier. And we're on Facebook, both as a company. We have a company Facebook page, and if you just love a specific game of ours, we have a Facebook group for it. I'm also active on Board Game Geek. So a lot of different places, also on Twitter. But I think the easiest thing for you to discover all those places, including our e-newsletter, is just to go to stonemeiergames.com. And all those things that I just listed are listed on that page. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the interview.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much it was nice to meet you, nice to talk to you, and I hope this event goes well.
Yes, thanks.
No niin, sellainen. Jamey ja Annika, aivan mahtava. Kiitos paljon Annika tästä ja kiitokset myös Jameylle. Oikein mielenkiintoista settiä ja tosiaan katsotaan mikä päätyi tässä mun huijatussa kyselyssä voittajaksi. Wingspani sai 62% äänistä, mutta Tapestry ja muutama muukin sieltä puuttui, joten tämä on ehkä kyseenalainen äänestystulos. Mutta seuraavana tosiaan 11:15, niin Kaitsu Todellisuuspaosta ja Miira Noppapotti blogista jakavat top 10 BGA-listansa ja kuulemma ollut hieman hankalaa rajata se siihen 10, joten saa nähdä miten käy. Nähdään toivottavasti siellä ja suunnatkaa tässä se pelaamaan tai bootheille tai minne päin tahansa. Jatketaan. Moi.